Well, everybody, welcome back to the Christian Capitalist Podcast. I'm so glad to be joined today by my friend Gene Ordillano, who is joining us today from the Philippines, where it is already the next day. Good morning, Gene.
Good morning, Pastor. Good morning, everyone.
We're so glad that you could make time today. And thank you. Gene and I were just talking before I hit record. It is already after midnight in the Philippines. And Gene, where are you in the Philippines this morning?
I live in Quezon Province in the Philippines.
And what kind of community is that?
Um, Actually, Quezon Province is mostly agricultural area here in the Philippines, where most of the people here is living through farming and agricultural activities.
Gotcha. And what kind of, that's interesting. Gene, I've known you for a while now and didn't realize that it was that much of a farming community. What kind of crops or agriculture do y'all have there?
Mostly it's rice, grains, and vegetables like tomatoes. Um, there are so many other crops that we are doing here in Quezon Province, depending on the season. But mostly it's
Ah,
rice.
gotcha. That's interesting. And so I have, first of all, that's making me hungry for vegetables. That sounds great. But Gene, what does that mean for your community when you have so many farms, and in particular rice? What do the towns look like? Are they smaller, or do you have one kind of big city in the province? How does that look?
Actually, Pastor, we're living in a rural area here in the Philippines. There are there are a lot of city places here in Quezon Province, but where I'm living at is mostly consists of fields, um, beaches, and also um, rice crops plantation. That is
Hmm.
mostly the scene here in the area I live in.
Gotcha. Well, your office behind you looks very modern, so I'm impressed at that. And so, Gene, thank you so much for joining us today. In particular, from this rural area of the Philippines, what a gift that we have this technology that allows us to have this conversation in real time from literally opposite ends of the planet. Isn't that wonderful?
Yes, I always thank God that I'm able to work from home and also to have the opportunity to meet people like you, meet people like Brianna. Of course, Brianna is the bridge into this opportunity to meet you. And I think it's just God's work that brought me into this kind of place, to this kind of work, to meet beautiful people that will not allow me just to work for a living, but to also preach the faith that I have in my heart.
Oh, Gina, I love to hear that. And that's exactly why I wanted you to come on to the podcast today. As you know, we're talking about the Christian capitalist, which is very focused on work and giving. And in fact, our motto is the more we make, the more we give. And so I love to hear when folks say, through my business, I want to preach the gospel, because that's what I'm trying to do as well. But let's start kind of at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about your family and how you grew up in the Philippines.
Okay, so as you may know, I'm a pastor kid. I have two younger sisters, and we are born into ministry. Before my parents get married, they were already in the ministry and pastoral ministries. And as I've described the area that we're living in, my family is assigned to do the pastoral work here in the rural area. So, as a kid, this is the community I've been looking forward to spend my life serving the Lord, and I think that's the beauty of serving the Lord, even if it's really hard to. Sometimes it's really hard to serve the Lord where 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 we are at now, but I thank God because this kind of community that I'm living in, and the kind of people we are surrounded by is so patient and so encouraging for us to continue the works of the Lord in this rural area. So, as most of the church members here in the church are farmers, agricultural workers, this is very challenging for the pastoral family that lives here in this place because it's very challenging here in the Philippines because of the changing season, the changing weather, and the typhoons that are coming in. We are in the Pacific Rim,
Oh,
so typhoons are coming so
yeah.
often here in the Philippines. And the challenging part of living as a pastoral family here in Quezon province is that people here in rural areas depends on the earning from agricultural activities and farming. We are um, we are depending on the good weather, the good season to um, to to
Right.
um, to support the way of living that we have here
Right.
in the
And
Philippines.
the price of rice, right? You
Yes,
got to
of
have all
course.
those good things just to get a product that then people want to buy, and you want them to pay a good price for it, right?
Yeah, and farmers here in Quezon province faces many struggles like high cost, unpredictable weather, and a little to no profit during typhoons and market oversupply. When there's
Mm.
market oversupply, yeah, and the cost goes down, and for the church to survive in this kind of rural area, no income means no tithes. You know that.
Yeah, yeah.
And no tithes meant there are no enough foods allowance for the pastor's family to survive on. But yeah, the good thing about the gracious God and his faithfulness is that we always survive to the grace of God. And up until now that I am 28 years old, we're still surviving and we are still growing into God's direction. And before it's too hard, but right now it's a little lighter to live on. And I think that's because God is teaching us to, to stay in where God has planted you, to stay
Hmm.
um, stay in the ministry, even if it's hard. Yeah.
Sure. Gene, I can't help but think as you're talking about Paul in his letter to the Philippians, where he says, I know what it is to have plenty, and I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to be hungry, and I know what it is to be full. It sounds like not only is that the case with the community there in Kazan province, right, and the farmers who deal with that every day, but the direct result of that is so did your family, right? If the farmers aren't making anything, then neither does the pastor.
Yeah.
So do you know the that phrase that I'm talking about, and how and kind of how did that impact y'all growing up? This kind of the cyclical nature of the farming community.
Um, Pastor, when I started to learn the nature of the place that we're living in here in Quezon province, as a kid I didn't really understand what we're going through. But as I grew up, I literally understand and the love of people around us here in Quezon province because even if it's hard, as I mentioned that it's really very challenging when it comes to the farming here in the Philippines, especially in Quezon province. The people around us literally made us feel that we are not lacking anything because when there is no food supply, when there is no tithes coming into the churches, each of these church members are bringing in rice, they're bringing in vegetables,
Mm,
they're bringing in foods to the pastor's table. And um, I learned and learned how the people love the ministry and love our family in the ministry as I grew up. Because what we are lacking financially is what we are gaining in the love of these people, because they are bringing what they can. They are bringing what they have to support the ministry. It's not just our efforts to continue the ministries here in Quezon Province, but it's also their effort to help us continue the ministry that we have here in Quezon Province.
So I love that, Gene, and what a fantastic way to put it. That even, we talk about this in the book extensively. That even the poorest of the poor can be
Yeah,
rich
yeah.
because of the love that they have with God and their neighbor. It really redefines what it means to be rich. Let me ask you this: what does ministry look like in Kazan Province? You mentioned that obviously it's an agricultural community and economy, but do people come to church on Sundays like they do in many other parts of the world, or is it a different form of worship because of this agricultural community?
Yes, Pastor, they are going to church every Sunday. It's more like family ministry because here in Quezon Province, there are big families that going into churches and the families of the families. So everyone here in the area knows everyone. We are
Uh-huh.
going to church every Sunday. We have Bible studies in different sitios here in Quezon Province, and we have also youth services during Fridays. We have prayer intercessor meetings during Thursdays, and it's a busy ministry here in Quezon Province. But most of most of the church members, they really give um, enough time to um, go to Sunday services and to this Bible studies.
Gotcha. Are there different kinds of churches there in Kazan Province? It sounds like y'all have a very busy one, but are there other churches there in that community?
Yes, Pastor. I think every barangay here in Quezon Province has a local church, a small local church. So, as I can say that there are no mega church here in the area, but
Mhm.
many local churches that ranges from 70 to 150 members per church.
Oh wow. Okay, so that's pretty typical for congregations size here in America. That's great. Well, Gene, let me just pause and say that your English is fantastic. And
Thank
I
you.
appreciate this. I could never, at least given my current capabilities, have a conversation like this in Spanish or in what is the? There are several languages that are spoken throughout the Philippines. What language did you grow up speaking?
Mostly in Filipino or Tagalog, but in school we
Tagalog,
are
right?
learning English because we are always taught that English is the universal language, so we must learn to speak well in English.
Well, your teachers did great. So you started speaking English at a very young age. It sounds like.
Yeah, I think in elementary days.
Gotcha. And so, where did you go to school? Was it here in Kazan Province, or did you go outside?
I went to spend my elementary days in the near in the nearby city here in Quezon because um yeah, I attended elementary in San Juan, Batangas, the next province. Well, it's just two barangays away from us. And I spent my college days in the city because way back then there are um not so many opportunities in the rural area for an industrial engineering course. So I went to the capital of the Philippines. I went to the city. I went to Manila to spend my college days and graduated from there.
That's great. And so, all right, I got a bunch of questions about that, Gene. First of all, that must have been a tremendous, what Americans would say is a culture shock, going from a rural area to one of the biggest cities in the world.
You can only
How did you
imagine.
exactly. So, how did that go? Did you know where you were going to live and have somebody that you could live with that you knew to kind of ease that transition? How did that work?
Actually, Pastor, I didn't know someone in Manila that will help me finish my studies. And aside from the financial struggles while finishing college, because as you may know, we don't have much, and I attended a public school there in Manila.
Mhm.
I don't know anyone from there, and there is something that it's like the accent here in the rural area that is very unfamiliar when you go to the city, and I was always so conscious conscious about it. Am I speaking the way they are speaking? Am I living the
Sure.
way they are living? But you know what, I found friends, Christian friends also in Manila that helped me and supported me through my college days. And, you know, um, the best thing about it is I know the people from our area is praying for me to finish college
Mhm.
in the city, because way back then when you go to the city to study college, it's not the usual thing for Filipinos in the rural areas. Usually,
Right.
when you're in the rural area, when you finish high school, it will end there. You will not go to college. But um, my very courageous parents sent me to the city to finish college, and I'm the first one to be sent out to the
Oh,
city
that's
to,
terrific, Gene.
yeah.
That's congratulations, and very courageous parents and very courageous you. That took a lot of courage to move to Manila. Hey, what school did you go to? What college did you attend?
I attended Polytechnic University of the Philippines in Santa Mesa, Manila.
Gotcha. And what made you interested in studying industrial engineering? Coming from a very rural background and a pastor's kid, that seems very kind of a different way of looking at the world and a different way of thinking. I think it's fantastic. But what kind of guided you into that?
Um, at first, Pastor, the funny story about being an industrial engineer is that I really want to attend a mass communication course during college at first. But then again, here in the Philippines, there is a statistics that the mass communication graduates um, cannot enter so many opportunities after graduation. There are
Mm.
no opportunities for this kind of courses. And I think as the first child of my parents, I cannot afford to have no job after college. And
That's very prudent. I love
yeah,
that.
and in the next week of having these statistics that I've researched before entering college, I researched that there are top courses that will be in demand for the next 10 years. And one of those courses is industrial engineering. And the funny thing is, I choose industrial engineering over all engineerings because it has no board exam.
Oh, okay. That's
So,
very smart.
yeah, it has no board exam. And I think after graduation, I can enter as much as opportunities as I can get, because I cannot afford to delay any time working, because I have two younger sisters that will be depending on me, and I have a ministry to support here in Quezon Province.
I love that, Gene. And so, what was it like going to school in Manila? Is the Polytechnic University a big one? So you had lots of big classes. Did you live in a dorm? What was that like?
I live in a dorm, and it's a big university where I jump from one campus to another campus for classes. So, um, the, I think it's not the challenge. Jumping from campuses to campuses is not the real challenge in college, but to survive living in the city away from your parents, sustaining yourself, budgeting your little budget, and also complying to all the requirements in school to graduate in the course that you chose.
Right. Oh, I just love this, Gene. So, as an industrial engineer, what kind of things did you want to do when you got done with college, when you graduated? It sounded like you planned on going back to Kazan province. Is that what you had in mind?
At first, Pastor, I didn't plan out to work from home. I know by that time that the opportunities is in the city. There are
Mhm.
not yet opportunities here in the rural areas. So in 2018 when I graduated, up until before the COVID pandemic, I was working in the city, and
Uh,
it it was only the COVID-19 that made me go back to Quezon province for good, because imagine I was going back and forth to city to Quezon province every weekends, just to be with the ministry, just to work in the city for weekdays and then go back every weekend
wow.
to Quezon province to to do the ministry. So I didn't imagine that the COVID-19 will happen, and it will lead me to working from home, and staying with the family, where in that time, the only thing that comes into my mind is that I have to be with my family in this kind of challenging times, and who knows what will happen months after months in the era of the COVID-19. So my current company that time gave us the opportunity to choose work from home while the COVID-19 is rampant here in the Philippines. And after COVID-19, when the restriction were were removed here in the area, um, I didn't think of going back to the city, because I think even if it's hard to find work from home opportunities, I will take that I will take that road just to stay here in Quezon province and be with my family.
I love that, Gene. So, so even while you were in Manila before you graduated, or yeah, before you graduated in 2018, and then afterwards, you were still going back and forth to Kazan province for the ministry. Tell us about that trip. How far is it from Manila to your home in this rural area, and how did you get there?
Actually, Pastor, when I was still a student there in Manila, I cannot afford to go back and forth to Quezon province. It is only when I graduated and I have my first work
Oh,
that I can afford going back and forth to Manila and Quezon province every weekends. But just to give you an idea, it's a bus ride, and it takes 3 to 4 hours depending on the traffic,
mhm.
on a one way trip. So it's always it's always like that during the weekends when
It's a long way. Yeah.
you go Friday night, and then you come into Quezon province in um 2 a.m.
Oh man, that's tough. Gosh, and then you'd have a busy weekend working on the ministry, and then head back to Manila on the same bus.
And it's the hardest when you enjoy the ministry work during the weekends. It's the hardest to go back into the city on Monday morning.
Sure, sure. Well, so I imagine that if it's like any rural and urban communities in America, that COVID was much different in Manila than it was in Quezon Province, right? Like here in rural areas,
Mhm.
it's important to social distance, but because it's rural, you a lot of people
Yeah.
just didn't have the restrictions that they did in a very congested urban area. So I think it makes a lot of sense to me. You would want to stay there
Yeah.
in Kazan, not go back to all the restrictions and the masks and all of that kind of stuff. But so what then led you into the current job that you have, working with Ignite and working with Brianna?
Actually, Pastor, I didn't imagine that I will be working with. Brianna. I will be working with Ignite. I'll be working with this awesome team that I have here in Ignite because I applied as an executive assistant in an agency, and I didn't know that this agency will match me to this kind of people. And
Ah,
I know it's God's work because what are the odds that you meet brothers and sisters from other country that will help you grow in faith, that will help you be a blessing for others? What are the odds that I'll get to meet you and speak into this podcast? And I think it's all God's work. It's all God's direction that I'm here with you. I'm here with Ignite, and I'm able to give more and support more in the ministry that I work here in the Philippines.
amen, Gene. I tell people all the time there's no such thing as coincidence. It's the Holy Spirit at work in our lives.
Yes,
I have
Pastor.
no doubt about that. And so, what kind of work do you do? For those who are not aware of Ignite, tell us a little bit about the kind of work that you do in marketing and helping businesses with their marketing uh, activities.
So at first, I work as an executive assistant here in Ignite, but now I work as a GTM engineer. And one of the tasks that I do here in Ignite is to create standard operating procedures and also help build help build, build systems for each of the processes that we have, and also for the clients that we have here in Ignite. So um, it is really an industrial engineering work
I was
that I
just going to
didn't
say that's exactly what you trained for.
yeah, that I didn't know that I will be doing. I am completely convinced that I'll be working on a job that I didn't study for in college, but it is all God's work. It's all God's faithfulness that I'm here, and I'm practicing industrial engineering. I am practicing building systems for others, practicing doing standard operating procedures for others that will help them grow their businesses too, help them have their foundations, their core, and that will help their business to grow. That will help them to keep all things in organized and um, in line with the direction that the company wants to.
I love that, Gene. So you also mentioned, well, I got two follow up questions about that. What your sisters are younger than you, right? So you're the oldest and the first to go to college. Just what a remarkable statement of your strength and your parents' inspiration to make all that work out. How about your sisters? Because you mentioned that when you graduated, you wanted to help support them. What do they do?
Yes. Um, Pastor, if I may able to brag this,
Of
it's not my
course.
pride, but I think it's the Lord's doing that. This the second of us, the one next to me is also a pastor now at a
Oh,
very
wow.
young age. She have seen the difficulty, the struggles of the pastor, yet she chooses to follow the steps of my father and mother. And she is now an associate pastor in one of the local church of our church, Redeemed Assembly of Christ International Incorporated. So she decided to enter pastoral ministries and go to the training school at the age of 18. And
Wow.
she didn't get to study college, but she finished the pastoral training for 2 years and now practicing as an associate pastor in one of our local church. And our youngest is now a graduate of information technology. She is also working in the city, but goes back and forth from Manila to Quezon province, just like me,
That's funny. I was
and
going to
serving
say,
in the
she knows
ministry.
that she gets to take that same bus you used to take, right?
Yes, Pastor. And both of my youngest sister and I is in the worship ministry, and also aside from the worship ministry, I am also involved in the discipleship training in the church,
Oh,
and
wow.
also I'm helping my father in this discipleship training to build more leaders in the church.
I love that. Tell us a little bit about discipleship training. First of all, do you get to use the skills that you've developed here with using the online technology, or is this more in person?
It is more it's more on the theological aspect, and also in um, building the systems in the church. It's
Mhm.
what can you expect from an industrial engineer but to build
Exactly.
systems? Yeah. So we are building systems, and as of now, we need so much leaders in the church because we are growing in number. We are growing in the needs of the church. We need more leaders. That's why, as a part of the ministry that sees the needs of the church, I decided to help when it comes to developing leaders. And it is also the good thing that as an industrial engineer we see um, we see systems that can help them be better as a new breed of leaders inside the church.
I
So
love that.
right now, Pastor, the church is growing in number, and we need larger place of worship here in Quezon Province, because from I think 80 members, we are now going to 100 and more church members. And during pandemic also, it's the leap of faith of this church that even with no funding, even if with no savings, we decided to renovate the church to make it larger because of the need to make everything everything bigger for the church member to be comfortable inside the church, to
Sure.
help also the church members when there are typhoons, there are emergencies, that they can stay in church. They can go to church, whatever they need, um whatever they need in this kind of season. And yeah, I think it's not just that we need a bigger church, but it is also the dream to build that is built by faith, that we will encourage more of the people here in the area to go to church. This is
Yes,
also
exactly.
this is also our faith, that we will encourage more people to know Christ more. We will encourage more people through the faith that we have, that they will see that they really need Jesus in their lives. And um, when this church has begun its construction, as I've mentioned, we have nothing. But right now, I think we're 70% done. We are just needing the flooring and the ceiling, but the foundation and the walls and the roof, it is almost done. And
I love that.
we
Are people
didn't.
volunteering to do that work? I'm sorry to interrupt, Gene. Are people volunteering to do that work?
Yes, Pastor, they volunteer in digging up the foundation of the church. When they have free time, they they go to church to bring snacks for those who works in the construction. And the good thing is that aside from the people that we hire to build the construction of the church, there are also members and the spouse of the members of the church that is going to the church to help build everything,
That's great.
mix the cement, do all the do all the digging, do all the construction works. And I think we've saved enough by this kind of volunteering while we are building the church.
Gene, I'm so glad to hear that. I have to say, as we're talking about your church growing and the new construction, to encourage people to come and to also make it more comfortable for those who are already attending, I can't help but think about a church here in our community that is closing. Just yesterday, I guess today's a Tuesday. On Sunday, as my wife and I were driving past it, there are workers, presumably volunteers who are members, taking the sign off the front of the church. So it's closing and being sold.
Oh
And we're not
no.
entirely sure what's going to happen again, to it in the future. There are rumors around that another church is going to come in and use that building.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't help but think of this is kind of the way that it has always been for 2,000 years. Churches come, churches go,
Mm-hmm.
but the ones that are able to preach the word in a way that resounds with people are able to grow. What do you think's leading to the success of the church in Kazan province that is allowing y'all to grow, unlike this one here in our community that's closing down?
I cannot speak well, Pastor, of what's happening there in your area, but I think
Sure.
I just can speak for our experience here in the Philippines, especially here in Quezon province, that um, what we have here in Quezon province is not just it's not just a church building, but a family. As I've mentioned, we've known each and every one here in the area, and even when the church are down in COVID-19 pandemic, there are no church services. There are people who are reaching neighbors to remind them of their faith, remind them of what Jesus can do in uncertainties. And I think the church here in Quezon province grew stronger because of the pandemic, because of the
Wow.
COVID-19 um, era, because we have nothing to hold on to but God in those kind of times. And when we are uncertain of the things that will happen next, you will always find someone to hold on to, and it's God. And
Hmm.
we didn't stop. We didn't stop serving the Lord, even if it's hard during the COVID-19. And we always reach out to these people during the online services, during the Bible studies, small Bible studies, because we cannot gather um, on a large number for the church services during pandemic. But yeah, I think that when you don't stop preaching Jesus, when you don't stop believing in Jesus, there will be no reason for you to grow in God, to grow in faith. Even if churches closes and opens up another, your faith will remain. Your your heart in Jesus will always grow searching for Jesus, because you know that you cannot hold on to something here in this world but God.
Well said. I love that. And so, as I'm thinking about it, y'all are growing, but it sounds like too from talking with Brianna earlier in the year that there's a certain component of what your parents do that's also mobile, right? They head out into the community and visit with the farmers there. Is that right?
Yes, Pastor. Um, Actually, it is part of my father's ministry to go on visitations with the people there, and even then, when I was still a kid, he go on a day jobs in this farming areas, because uh, it's his way on supporting us, his daughters, to live by the day.
Sure.
So he
Sure.
knows well enough how to work with the people in the area, doing farming, doing everything. And aside from visitation into these farmers, these church members that we have in church, he knows also how to do the job. He also knows how
I love that.
to to be with the people who do the same thing in the area.
I love that. In our church, I used to be a lawyer. And when I was a lawyer and a pastor, we would call that bivocational ministry, right? So you have two vocations. A lot of people said, well, this is so unusual. Why don't you just devote yourself to the church? And I would say, well, because being in business not only helps me have a new way of worshiping, but it also helps me relate to the people in the congregation. And it sounds like your dad
Yes,
found that
pastor.
too, right?
Yes, pastor. And before
Yeah.
going to the ministry, my father and my father's father is a farmer.
That's great. Well, Gene, let me ask you this. So many people in America, whether they're in big cities or suburban areas,
Hmm.
suburban towns, so many people have trouble relating to the parables that Jesus told or the stories in the Old Testament because they're agriculturally based. Like when you say, hey, all it takes is the faith of a mustard seed
Hmm.
to grow into this mighty shrub. Or when the workers in the field go in and they're paid the same, regardless of how long they're in the field. Those agricultural examples to many people who've never farmed are difficult for them to relate to. How about in a rural area where you have so many farmers? Do you find that the people appreciate those stories more or can relate to them more? Or do you find different ways to tell those stories now?
I can say, Pastor, that they can relate more into this kind of stories because they know how a seed grow, how hard it is to grow a crop. And
Yeah.
um and the thing is, for a crop to grow, it needs care. It needs all the elements for it to grow. And they can relate this into their Christian living, to their Christian life, because they know that they need a community to grow. They need someone to they need someone to grow with in their faith. And they can see the community as an element to help them grow in their Christian faith. And aside from growing a mustard seed, they know also that everything that they receive, or or everything that grows from the seed that they they planted, it belongs to God.
Yes.
It belongs to
Yes.
God.
And it's hard. Gene, I'm so glad to hear you say that because we talk about that in our church all the time. And as you know, excuse me, we talk about that in the book, that everything we have is a blessing from God. But when you have a paycheck and you go to a job that involves going to an office like I'm in right now, it's difficult to kind of get your mind around that because you think, well, my paycheck comes from my employer, my company, and I sit in a building that was made by people. It's difficult to put your mind around that the fact that it's a blessing. But we're watching a seed grow with the sun and the water and the plant.
Hmm.
I think it's easier to put that into reality. What do you think?
Pastor, um, even as a kid growing up, I know that everything that we have is God's. Everything that we receive is from God, and it is given for us to. It is given to us to serve God also. And my father always tell me that if I need something, I tell it to the Lord. Even if I don't ask him, I just tell it to the Lord, and the Lord will give us what we need. And as a kid growing up, I understand that everything belongs to God because I ask everything in God. My father told me to ask everything in the Lord. So I totally understand as a kid that everything belongs to God because my father wants me to ask God everything I need. So, uh, um, and this lesson has been taught in my earlier days as a kid, and as as someone now who's working and receiving paycheck, as you've mentioned. Um, this is given by God and it belongs to God. I have never, I have never, I have never removed that in mind that whatever I receive and whatever God has given me, it's not mine, but it's the Lord's. So if He's given me this blessing, He wants me to use this to be a blessing also.
I
If He
love it. And
gives,
so, Gene,
yeah,
oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead. If he gives what?
if He gives if He gives me everything that I need, everything that really um re sometimes He's given me things that I didn't ask also. more than the things that I really need. And the gratefulness in my heart is always there because I know that this is more than I asked for, or even I didn't ask
Mm.
for this, but He has given me this kind of blessing. And the response would be to give back to the Lord, of course, give what belongs to Him, the tithes and the offering. But aside from this tithes and offering, you have to understand that He didn't give you something just for yourself. He gave you something for you to be a blessing to others. And if He's blessing you more, He wants you to bless others more.
Uh-huh. And that's why one of the core concepts of the Christian capitalist is the more we make, the more we give, right? The
Yes,
more we are
Pastor.
blessed, the more we bless others. I love that, Gene. So tell us how then, you mentioned all the work that you do in ministry there in Kazan province. How do you give to others? Do you have a charity that you like to support? Do you support your church, or do you give directly, or all of the above? How does that work?
Um, Here in Quezon Province, aside from the tithes and offering, um, the first thing that I support aside from giving my tent to the church and also the offering is to support the pastoral family, because as you
Hmm.
may know, Pastor, um, my parents don't receive salary as pastors. They only receive food allowances from the church. And I
Wow.
think the first thing that I know I want to support is the pastoral family, my parents
Hmm.
who do the ministries, because I know that if you bless the pastors of the church, there will be a lot more people who will hear the word of God when you bless this kind of people. And it's only a bonus that they are my parents. But yeah, um, this is the first people I want to support. And the next ministries that I support in church is the worship ministry, the ministry I belong to. I am
Mhm.
supporting um, the musicians and the singers of the church. We still don't have enough equipments in the church. We still don't have the right instruments to play with. Our our instruments are way older than way older than it should be. We still have a lot more things to improve inside the worship ministry. But I think as I receive more blessings from the work that I do here in Ignite, I will be able to help more when it comes to our worship ministry. And right now, I am proud to say that I really know what God is calling me to do. I really know in my heart what God has planted in my heart as someone who knows the ministry since she is a kid. And I know God will provide. I know God will support the things that I want to support too, because um, I really believe that the way you serve people, the way you serve people around you, especially in the ministry, is also a way to worship God.
Absolutely. Gina, I'm so glad to hear you say that. I think that's one of the key things that Jesus taught us, right? Is that I came here to serve others, right? He who is first will be last, and he who's last will be first. And so I love this notion of servant leadership. I think you're very much in line with what Christ taught us to do. Let me ask you this before we leave off of it. We want to make sure we put in the show notes for our episode today a way that people can give to support the worship there. Maybe even if it's instruments that we can send to the Philippines, but hopefully some money to help pay for construction or the instruments. Is that possible? Do they have a way for us to give and support that way?
Actually, Pastor, we are combining our efforts, Brianna and I, and also I've discussed this to our local church on how we can get a platform for people to help us, because right now we receive no funding from anyone. We don't receive any support from anyone. And I opened up this discussion in our church meeting last week, because I think God is leading us to this kind of position where people can help the ministry as much as we want to help others too. So
Exactly.
um, we are combining efforts into finding a way how this funding, how this support can possibly go to this Quezon province churches that we have here. And right now, to be honest, we don't have that yet, but we are working on um, this platform that we can accept support and funding from other people.
Fantastic, and we'll be sure to give that platform to everybody who's hearing this episode, that so that they can support if they're called by God to do so. Gene, one of the most important concepts of the Christian capitalist is that anybody can be a Christian capitalist. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to write a big check. What I heard you say earlier, in the way that the farmers in the community support your parents, really emphasizes that, right? Whether it's the widow's mite and the 2 coins that she gave to the
Mm-hmm.
treasury, and Jesus
Mm-hmm.
said, "Look at that, she's given more than anybody." But just the fundamental way that the people of Israel would support the priests, the tribe of Levi. They would just bring them fruits and vegetables. They would bring them wheat. Um, what what does that look like? What does generosity look like in Kazan province? And how do you is there a distinction between the rich and the poor, like there are in so many other communities around the world, or is everybody kind of at the same financial level, so that generosity is more in terms of these the fruits and the vegetables or things rather than money?
Actually, Pastor, I can speak for everyone, but most of the people here have the same level of financial status here, and there are people who are funding the farmers, but most of the people here are farmers.
Right.
So these people who funds the farmers are, I think, they are the more financially stable families here in Quezon province. But for you to be able to fund the farmers, really you have to have other businesses, to have other income. So there are few people who fund the farmers, but most of the people are farmers or have agricultural activities like uh, crops and um, poultries and other um,
I see.
animal stuff.
You got to be diversified, right?
Okay.
Hey, Gene, let me ask you then, before we leave off, because we're 2 Sundays into the Easter season, or I guess one Sunday into the Easter season. What did Easter look like in Kazan province? How did y'all celebrate?
Most of the people here in the area are now born again Christians, but there are still people who are um, bonded by um, the activities that they do, like what do you call this? Um, they are engaged into going to mountains to pray in the mountains. They are engaged into going to churches or further churches to visit other churches in Easter. But in the area where I live in, um, we go to church, we pray, and we spend our time thinking of what Jesus has done for us in the cross. And I think that's the beauty of Easter, when you think of what Jesus has done for you and for other people, what Jesus has done in the cross, what Jesus has done to save us. And we encourage everyone in the area also to more on the activities that they can do during Easter, more than the things that they can do outside their houses or going to other places during Easter. Is their time um to think of what Jesus has done, and to pray, and to, if they can, if they can speak to other people what Jesus has done, it could be better.
Yes, to carry the word. Well, Gina, I'm so glad to hear about Easter in the Philippines. As we conclude today, I want to ask you kind of our signature question, which is, what does it mean to you to be a Christian capitalist?
I think I've mentioned this already as we speak during this kind of interview, but being a Christian capitalist means working hard as an act of worship and giving generously as an act of love for God and for people.
Amen. Gene, that was perfect. We got to write that down. I love that.
Thank you,
Thank you
Pastor.
so thank you so much for joining us today. It's been terrific visiting with you. God bless you and your family and the work that you're doing in Kazan province. And we'll look forward to hearing more about how the church is growing there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome.